In today's video, I'm going to be explaining how I've made this much money working as an Uber Eats driver in Wellington, New Zealand. I've been doing Uber Eats for nearly 2 years now, and I feel like I'm in a position where I can help other people get started with their Uber Eats journey, or maybe other ambitious Uber Eats drivers that are currently doing Uber Eats in New Zealand. And something that I've been saying a lot in my most recent videos, and something I'm kind of aspiring to do on this channel, is try and make videos that would be really helpful for my 18, 19, 20-year-old self. And I feel like, once again, this is a video that goes with that, principle of what I'm trying to do with this channel. And I'd actually been contemplating for a very long time as to whether or not I was going to make this video or the information in this video like a paid course or paid service, because I felt in my mind I would be very confident in yielding like a return on my investment from putting in like the time and effort to make this video. Like, for example, if I spent like tens of hours putting together all this information that I've learned through Uber Eats, and it costs $30, $40, $50 for somebody to access it, I would be very confident that that $30, $40, $50 that person paid, it would yield them a return on their investment. Like, I feel as though my learnings from doing Uber Eats would, significantly increase the hourly rate of people that are just getting started with Uber Eats. But I've decided that I don't want to go down that route, and I figured I'd be better off just generating goodwill, and people will just really appreciate me putting this, service or information out here on YouTube, just providing pretty much every single bit of detail that I've learned. And I think that will result in maybe more people like seeing this information, and that could refer more people wanting to use like my referral link for Uber Eats. If you're unfamiliar with what the referral benefit is for signing somebody up to Uber Eats, it's $300 at the moment. So what I'm going to be doing is leaving multiple timestamps throughout this video. So if you're curious about a particular section about Uber Eats driving and just the whole process, you can navigate down to the description or just like scroll through on your timeline to see the section that you want to learn about or want more information about, or whatever you want to call it. Initially, I want to make sure that somebody that has no understanding of Uber Eats whatsoever kind of has an understanding. So I will briefly be going over like what the requirements are to become an Uber Eats driver initially. And then I'll progress into things like how you can maximize your earnings as an Uber Eats driver, and also how you can navigate things like taxes and expenses, and basically just have the best result being an Uber Eats driver to make the most money possible. And as a consumer of videos myself, I absolutely hate it when people waffle, so I'm just gonna get straight into this video. So if you want to become an Uber Eats driver, there are 3 requirements pretty much to get started. You need to be at least 18 years old, have your full license, and drive a car that is newer than 1990. So if you fit those 3 requirements, basically all you have to do is upload some additional documentation like your warrant of fitness, what your car insurance is, and also a background check as well. The whole procedure is pretty straightforward, but I will mention a few things here and there just so you kind of have the best information kind of going into it. So for the background check, from the last time I did it or heard, it costs $37 to get a background check approved, and I'm pretty sure that background check has to be done directly through Uber. You can't do it through like a third party or have done it recently and then just say to Uber that you've recently passed a background check. It has to be done through Uber for whatever reason, but I don't think there are any ways around that. And then for your insurance, I'll leave my personal insurance kind of on the screen and what I pay. What I would encourage doing is just going to different providers and making sure that your provider is going to cover you for both personal and commercial use, or AKA they're going to cover you if you have an accident if you're doing Uber Eats. So as I said, with my insurance, I'll reveal mine. Basically, I think my car's value is about $4,000, and I have an excess of either $500 or $750, and my monthly premium for both personal and commercial use or working for Uber Eats, I think is currently $57 per month. It's been reduced from what it was $68 per month last year. Now, moving on, I'm going to be discussing how the Uber application kind of works. So once you've successfully gone through and uploaded all of your documentation, you'll be able to access the Uber driver application. I don't actually have my phone in front of me, so I can't really show and display me navigating, like going through the actual Uber driver application. But basically, to keep it very simplistic, if you want to start receiving orders, all you need to do is press this button to go online. And then on the sidebar, there's like a few different tabs. For example, you can see what you've earned. You can also see your opportunities as well, which we'll discuss in thorough detail throughout this video. And a few other things like your account, where you can see like your documentation and make sure everything's up to date, and maybe some other things as well. I think there's Uber Eats Pro, but I don't think that kind of section is like all that important when being an Uber Eats driver. It's kind of like build-ups. I don't know if you're familiar with the saying in New Zealand, but yeah, it's kind of like not all that important if you're an Uber driver, in my opinion at least anyway. Now, if you are wanting to become an Uber driver, I would also encourage you getting these things as well. I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think it's compulsory that you buy a delivery bag from Uber directly if you want to become an Uber driver now. When I signed up in October 2021, that wasn't a requirement. I wasn't it wasn't a compulsory thing for me to get a delivery bag directly from Uber. The insulated bag that I'm currently using at the moment is just one from Countdown. I think my mum got it for me for like $4 or something like that. And I'd also recommend having some sort of phone stand as well. And I think it's quite key for you to have a phone stand that will enable you to look at your phone and see everything in front of you in your peripheral. Unfortunately, the phone stand that I've had for about a year and a half actually broke on me. So I had a bit of a problem where I was having my phone stand kind of on the left of my steering wheel, and when I looked at my phone when I got an order, everything wasn't in my peripheral. So pretty much when I went to go on my phone, I need to pull over and stop. Whereas if I had my phone kind of on the right side of my steering wheel and just to the kind of right of my peripheral, I could still see everything and look at my phone kind of at the same time, which is definitely a best practice. It's just going to completely kind of reduce your risk and increase your safety. You guys know what I'm trying to say. And I'd gone back to Kmart where I had that phone stand that broke on me for like a year and a half trying to get a new one, and they didn't have the same one in stock. They had some other ones that I weren't all that happy with, and it was going to mean that I wouldn't be able to see everything in my peripheral. So what I did was I actually bought a phone stand off the site called Temu or whatever it's called. I've seen it being marketed quite a lot. It's pretty much just like a doppelganger or fork of AliExpress or whatever. It's just pretty much the same thing. And you're definitely going to want to have some sort of phone charger set up. I wouldn't encourage having a wireless car charger. It's a bit of a funny story. I actually tried to start a wireless car charging business back in the day, but it was pretty unsuccessful because wireless charging is significantly slower than actual wired charging. And if you're running multiple applications on your phone, which you probably will be because you're an Uber driver and you're probably going to be wanting to listen to music or podcasts when driving, your battery is going to be taking a hit, if that makes sense. There's been multiple occasions where my phone has died when I've been on a shift, even with a wired car charger. So you're definitely going to want to have some sort of car charger on your shifts when doing Uber Eats. So it's definitely worthwhile getting one of those. So now that's all out of the way and you're ready to start making money and start doing deliveries, let me just briefly go over how accepting orders kind of work and what you can expect as a delivery driver. So when you go online and you're positioned in a place where it's a favorable location for Uber to give you orders, you'll get an order appear on your screen. It will look something like this, and it will give you some different metrics about this specific order if you are to accept it. So for example, this order I've left on the screen, it will display the estimated time that it's projected to take for you to complete this order. It will also display the restaurant that you'll be picking this order up from, and it will also display the street or streets that you'll be delivering the order to as well. And probably the most important metric is it will show the minimum amount that you'll get if you complete this order. And I guess also as well, it'll display kind of the GPS location for both the restaurant and the customer if you accept the order as well. So there's a lot of information that goes into an order on the kind of Uber Eats application or software. So with this information that you're provided to Uber based off the order, there are two things that you can do. You can either accept it or you can decline the order. Now, if you decline the order, there is no consequence for declining it. With some other competitors of Uber Eats like DoorDash and deliveries and stuff, sometimes you might not necessarily have a choice or there's a consequence if you decline an order, but in Uber Eats' case, there is actually no consequence if you decide to decline an order. There may, however, be a consequence if you do decide to cancel an order. I guess I'll briefly go over that, but basically canceling an order is when you decide to accept an order, but once you've accepted the order, then you decide to cancel the order because of some sort of circumstance or situation. So you might get in a little bit of trouble if you're canceling orders too frequently, but if you're declining orders, that's a completely different story. There's no consequence for doing that. I'm not going to go too much into detail about canceling orders. The objective of this video is to try and make sure you make the most money possible. Now, what I will say is though, just think about it from Uber's perspective. Uber's probably not going to be making money and they're going to feel as though they're being screwed around if you're accepting orders and then canceling orders. It's just going to be inconvenient process for them basically. So it's probably in your best interest to not try cancel so many orders, if that makes sense, because it could lead to your account getting suspended and stuff like that. Okay, so now I'm going to be discussing how you can maximize your earnings as an Uber driver. And pretty much what it comes down to is just doing some basic math and planning for the most part. I don't know if I mentioned this in this video before, but I know for a fact that my average hourly rate since I've been an Uber Eats driver has been $35 per hour. So I know it's like a baseline, that's kind of what I'm aiming for. Ideally, I try to make more than that per hour as well, especially considering $35 an hour is my average hourly rate, and considering we are in winter right now, and I've also been an Uber driver for like a prolonged period of time now, and it's my average. So obviously the first year I was probably earning a little bit less because I was more inexperienced, whereas now I'm more experienced. We're in a period where there's pretty significant demand for deliveries and all this kind of stuff. And as I said, it pretty much comes down to math and planning. For example, I'm in a circumstance now that I pretty much know what kind of hourly rate I can expect when I go out to work a shift based off the Quest or promotion that I receive from Uber. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail so you understand how I know in a second. But firstly, what we'll do is let me just show you an example of like some math for like an order and stuff and how you could expect to earn like a average hourly rate that's higher or whatever and stuff like that. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is, say for example, you got an order and the estimated time for that order is supposed to take you 20 minutes. And Uber is displaying that the minimum amount that you're going to receive for this order is like $10 or something like that. So if you do the math in your head, say you were to continuously receive orders, that would mean that your average hourly rate based off this order you received would be $30 per hour. And you need to pay for your expenses. So in reality, you'd probably only be making, between $24 and $26 an hour, depending on the car that you have. But say there was an alternative order that you got where the estimated time to complete it was 15 minutes and Uber was displaying that the minimum amount that you were going to receive for this order would be $10. That order indicates that you'd be earning about $40 per hour, assuming that you continuously got similar orders after you completed that order. So again, you can kind of see how math is like an important indicator when trying to maximize your earnings. But unfortunately, it's not really like as simple as that. There are a few other different things and variables to take into account. For example, you might not get these continuous orders and you might have a quest, for example. So there might be a circumstance where, say you can complete 2 trips within like a 20-minute period, but you're only getting like $8. That would probably be an average hourly rate if you didn't have a quest of like $24 off the top of my head. But because you've got a quest, it might be advantageous for you to take that so you can make progress towards a quest. And I'll explain why it might be advantageous for you to do that. Now, for me to explain it, I've got to kind of summarize what quests are. So what Uber likes to do is they'll give you some sort of promotion during like a certain duration where if you complete a certain amount of trips, you'll get some sort of benefit on top of the earnings that you get from like the orders you complete. So let me give you an example of the most recent quest that I had. This was yesterday when I worked from like 5 to 9 p.m. So Uber said to me basically, Jack, if you do these amount of trips, we'll give you this kind of payout. So what the quest was is if I completed 3 trips within the period of 5 to 9 p.m., I'd get $12. And if I completed another 3 trips, I'd get $14. And then the following 3 trips was like 16 and the last 3 trips was 18. So if you do the math, if I did 12 trips during that period, I think I'd get 60 or maybe $70. I'm trying to do the math in my head while I'm speaking about this, but basically I get $60 or $70 on top of the earnings that I'd make while doing the quest or whatever, right? And I'll give you another example of a quest that I've got at the moment. And this quest runs from a duration that's significantly longer than just like a day from 5 to 9 p.m. This quest that I've got at the moment is running from Monday to Thursday. And I think if I complete 40 trips, I'll get $65. Now, quests are a little bit frustrating because Uber isn't actually very transparent about how quests work. No one really knows from my understanding. I talk to a lot of different people in the community that are actually Uber drivers, and I can't get a conclusive answer about how they kind of work. I kind of just have an assumption that if you do complete the first threshold that you're given during like a certain duration, the following week it will be increased, or maybe your quest will be a little bit worse. So for example, if I complete this current quest that I've got this week from Monday to Thursday, which is 40 trips, that's the first threshold. So if I do complete 40 trips this week, the following week I might have like a threshold to complete of like 60 trips in order for me to get some sort of incentive, which is probably not going to be favorable for me because it's going to require me to work more hours. But that's just a theory that I have. It's not like necessarily always accurate, but I've noticed like a kind of reoccurring pattern, and I think a lot of other Uber drivers have as well. So I said earlier, math and planning is super important in terms of maximizing your earnings. So let me share with you, why that's super relevant with these quests. So I'll give you the stat and figure that I'll share about my experience. So I know that on average, I complete 3.2 trips per hour. It's a little bit weird, but let's just say, I complete anywhere from 3 to 4 trips per hour, depending on how busy it is really, or when I'm working. So I know off the top of my head, in order for me to receive the $65 amount, I'm gonna need to work at least 10 to 15 hours during this period from Monday to Thursday. And unfortunately, I can't quite get this number in my head, but if you do the math for per trip that I'd be getting if I complete these 40 trips, I think it'd be an extra $1.50 per order that I do. I think it actually would be a little bit more than that because it would be $1.50 if it was like a $60 bonus, but a $65, so it's confusing me a little bit. But I'll give a better example of the quest that I most recently completed from 5 to 9 p.m. on the Sunday, or yesterday when I recently worked. So if you remember, I got a quest where I needed to complete basically 12 trips from 5 to 9 p.m. And if I completed those 12 trips, I'd get $60 or $70. Let's just say for this example, it was $70. I might be wrong. I think it is $70. But anyway, let's say, I complete these 12 trips and I divide, $70 by 12 trips. So Off the top of my head, I think that's about $6 I'd be getting per order if I were to complete this quest. And again, I know that I do 3.2 trips per hour, so it's probably pretty likely I can complete this quest if I do work during that whole duration of 5 to 9 p.m. Generally, I can smash out 12 trips during this time frame, I know that. And in this case yesterday, I actually did an average of about 4.2 trips per hour. From memory, I think I got this quest done before like 8 p.m. I started at like 4:40 and then I got cranking after I did an order from like 4:40 to 5 p.m. and I just smashed it out, got 12 trips done, and you know, these are my earnings that were displayed. So because I got everything so done, my hourly rate was really high during this shift. So because I knew I was going to be getting $6 per trip that I did, mathematically, it was going to be very advantageous for me to just accept the shortest trips possible, the ones that I could complete in a very quick time frame. So when I was accepting orders yesterday, I deliberately only accepted the orders that were going to take a very short time frame for me to complete. Because the minimum amount that you can receive per order when doing Uber Eats is $5, regardless of how short it is. And if you get like an additional order on top of that $5 order, the minimum amount for that order at the moment is currently $4. So let's say yesterday, for example, there was a circumstance where I got an offer from Uber to pick up 2 deliveries at the same time, which is something that happens with Uber Eats. You can either take 1 order, 2 orders, or even 3 orders at one time. But let's just say for this example, I got an offer to take 2 trips at a time, and they were paying me $9, which is the absolute minimum that Uber can pay me for doing 2 trips. And the estimated time for these 2 trips was going to take me 20 minutes. So if I were to, complete this quest, which I was very confident I was going to do, I was going to be getting $6 for every single trip that I was going to complete. So let's do the math for without the quest. I was getting $9 and the estimated time for me to complete the 2 trips. That would be an hourly rate of $27 per hour. But because I knew I was going to be getting $6 per trip that I did, I knew that the amount that I was actually going to be getting for these 2 trips was going to be $21. And the estimated time for me to complete the 2 trips was going to be 20 minutes. So you can see where I'm coming from. I kind of have done the math in my head and I've developed a strategy that is going to enable me to earn kind of like the most money possible. This is a circumstance that I'd be very happy with, right? If I'm earning $21 and it's the estimated time for me to complete that delivery is 20 minutes, that's an hourly rate of like $63 or $64 per hour, I'm pretty sure. And there might be a circumstance, right? Maybe Uber offers me a pretty generous order where I need to deliver 1 trip and maybe it's going to give me a minimum amount of $20, but the estimated time to complete that order might be 30 minutes. So generally I'd be pretty excited. Maybe I'd want to take that order, but if 1 trip is going to take me 30 minutes, that means the likelihood of me being able to complete 12 trips within 4 hours is going to be reduced, which means I might not necessarily get $6 per trip that I complete. But even if I was to complete, all of the trips for that quest, let's say I completed the 12 trips, I would only be yielding $26 for that trip and it would take me 30 minutes of work, which would be less favorable than the other trip that I accepted that was going to take me 9 minutes and I do 2 trips at one time. Sorry if that was a bit overwhelming, but you kind of get where I'm coming from. So order selection is just so crucial, and it's very important to do a little bit of planning prior to the shift that you do work to see like what is going to be the most like favorable thing for you to do. So now maybe you have an understanding about how I know what I'm going to be making when I go out to do a shift. Yesterday was a little bit of an exception because I actually got a few more tips than I regularly do. If you're curious about the tips that I usually receive, it's about 4 to 5% of the income that I make. Whereas yesterday, I think it was like 11 or 12%, so it was much higher than what it usually is. And I also was able to complete well above my average trips per hour. I think I did, like 4.2 or 4.3 trips per hour, whereas usually I do like 3.2 per hour. I know it's very like analytical and stuff, but it's just kind of what I like to do. I like to try and make as much money as I can, so knowing these numbers is pretty important. And although I think order selection is probably the core part in order for you to like maximize your earnings, I guess, there are definitely some other best practices that you can implement into your workflow when being an Uber driver for sure. For example, parking, right? Like if you know exactly where the best park is based off the restaurant that you go to, it's going to save you a lot of time and it's going to enable you to complete trips faster, right? And if you can complete trips faster, not only will it be more favorable for quests, it just means that you're going to be able to do more trips, make more money, etc., right? And since I briefly mentioned parking, I'll actually go into detail about how I navigate parking in Wellington, which is one of the more busy places in New Zealand, I say, for traffic. And the way I do it is I visualize where I expect a park will be based off the restaurant that I'm going to. After I had done a couple hundred deliveries, I noticed that there was kind of like a recurring theme about where parks would be at a specific restaurant that I go to. So for example, if I go to McDonald's on Manor Street, or if I go to Noodle Canteen on Corny Place, or if I go to some sort of street on Newtown, I'll know the restaurant and I know exactly where a park will be or an alternative park will be. And also in terms of the actual places that I park, and how I go about all of that. First thing is, I don't ever park in disabled car parks, and I would not recommend it. One, it's a really big fine, and two, I just feel it's ethically wrong. I don't want to be in a circumstance where like I'm taking up a park where a possible, disabled person wants to park, or somebody has the ability to park in one of those. I don't want to do that, and I wouldn't encourage it at all, first and foremost. But pretty much my attitude towards parking is to make sure that I'm in a circumstance where I have an extremely low likelihood of causing any sort of incident or accident, I guess, and I clearly communicate what I'm doing. So, if I think I'm going to be in a spot extremely temporarily, like for say less than 1 minute, I'll put my hazard lights on. And I think the general consensus is people will respect, what you're doing, especially if you're going to be there very temporarily and you're communicating what you're doing. So just kind of maybe replicate my attitude. You don't necessarily have to, but that's just how I'm going about it and what I feel is best. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are profiting as much money possible, right? Like, it's all good if you're earning $100,000 per year, but if you're spending, $99,000 a year and you've only got $1,000 left over, that's not really any good, right? So let's talk about expenses and how you can navigate and go about saving the most amount of money possible for like your Uber Eats business, right? So let's talk about my circumstance, right? So at the moment, I'm driving a fuel car. It's a 2009 Honda Fit. It could be in your best interest to get a hybrid vehicle. Now, I'm not necessarily in a circumstance where I'm like prepared to, I suppose, get a hybrid or electric vehicle like a Tesla yet, unfortunately. I am definitely looking to upgrade my car sometime in the very near future. There might be a circumstance where I might be able to do Uber taxi driving. I think I'm eligible to do it in October. So we'll see about that. Maybe I'll make the upgrade then. But for the moment, I'm driving a fuel car. And I know this might not be ideal to some people, but I say this very frequently. And just to be simplistic, about 10% of the income that I make from Uber Eats goes towards gas from my 2009 Honda Fit. So, if I make $1,000 doing Uber Eats, it's probably likely around about $100 of that $1,000 I make goes towards gas. Now, unfortunately, there probably will be some other costs associated with running an Uber Eats business. You've got to take into account things like depreciation on your car, and then the admin and maintenance and insurance and all these kind of things. But to be honest, at the end of the day, I would be driving this car regardless if I was like a Uber Eats driver. And I know that, obviously I'm going to incur more costs, driving my car more frequently, doing Uber Eats and doing it as like a job and all that. But, I'd still be paying for my warrant of fitness. I'd still be paying for my registration. I'd still be paying probably a pretty similar amount for my insurance. So the core costs are definitely gas and probably, depreciation and I don't know, those kind of things, right? Some things that I only directly incur from, using my car for Uber Eats. Now, I can't just click my fingers and like say I'm not gonna have any expenses, but there are some things that I found that you can do to definitely reduce your expenses, especially gas. So there are two softwares that I personally really like and I think are crucial if you're wanting to save the most amount of money on gas possible. So there's one software called Gas Spy or Gaspy. I honestly don't know the pronunciation for it. It kind of irritates me. I presume now, like using logic, it's probably called Gas Spy. But anyway, this software pretty much just like shows you where the cheapest gas stations are in your kind of local area. So that's a really handy one. I kind of have noticed there's like a recurring theme that the cheapest gas stations in my area are actually very close to where I live in Lower Hutt, so that's pretty favorable for me. But there is another software that I think is really helpful, and I think a lot of people will be familiar with this. It's pretty much called ShareTank. It's like a function or feature that Zed has where you can basically fill up as many liters as you'd like, and you can use them at any time, and you can lock in a certain price for a future date. So for example, something I did recently was I bought 400 liters of fuel because I knew that the price of fuel was going up by like 29 cents per liter as of like the 1st of July 2023. Now, I suppose technically there's an alternative way that you can save money on expenses as an Uber driver as well. It's a little bit more complex, and I've mentioned it very frequently on my channel and kind of how to go about it, but essentially it's by keeping a logbook. And the reason why you'd keep a logbook is for one of two reasons: either to track the kilometer rates that you use for business, or trying to determine the frequency that you use your car for business. It's kind of weird talking about it because I've mentioned it so frequently on this channel, but I will go into detail because I'm trying to cover all bases in this video. What I've been doing is I've been using this software. It's called Driver's Note. I discovered it a couple months ago and I really liked it, and the functionality of the app. Pretty much what it does is it just tracks the trips that you do in your car basically, and then you can filter which trips that you do for personal use and business use, and it'll generate a report for you of the frequency that you use your car for business use. So for example, last financial year, I believe I used my car 70 to 75% of the time for business use. And I'll explain why knowing that is crucial and how that can, reduce your expenses, I suppose, or specifically reduce your taxes. And what I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description to Driver's Note. This isn't sponsored, but I'm affiliated with them because I reached out and I said, I'd really love to work alongside you. I'm going to be promoting your service. So I figured, I'd reach out to them and get in touch. So there's an affiliate link in the description where I get a little bit of a kickback if I refer people to the platform. So I'll leave that there if you want to help support me. And if you don't want to use Driver's Note for whatever reason, I know that the IRD provides some sort of template, but personally, I actually don't like that template at all. And I actually created my own template. I've got a link to it on Notion. Maybe I'll leave it in the description. I haven't been using it nearly as much just because it requires a lot more admin and I need to, update it frequently. But with Driver's Note, the whole process is basically automated, and I definitely prefer the automated process rather than tracking every single trip that I do manually. So there's that, spreadsheet or I guess template that you can have free access to, I suppose. I'll leave maybe both resources in the description, I guess, but if you just search IRD mileage logbook template, then you can get access to it, I guess. Now let me just explain the two different scenarios depending on what route you go down. It would look like this basically. So say you earned an income of $50,000 per year doing Uber Eats, and your expenses were you spent $10,000 on your car. This was gas, insurance, maintenance, and all this kind of stuff, right? So that would leave you with net profit of $40,000, and that's the amount that you'd pay taxes on. But because you didn't use your car 100% of the time for business use, you're not actually able to claim $10,000 of those, expenses. You're only able to claim the frequency that you used your car for business use. Now, in my case, last financial year, I can't remember exactly if it was 70 or 75%. Let's just say it was 75%. That would mean that, if I were to earn $50,000 doing Uber Eats, that I would only be able to claim, $7,500. So I would end up paying $42,500 worth of taxes instead of $50,000 if I navigated and did everything correctly and all that good stuff, right? That's pretty much how it works. Hopefully that's a pretty simplistic explanation. And then alternatively, you can claim the kilometer rates that you use your car for business use as well. And I know they've actually changed the kilometer rates from the last financial year. I think they try to update them every financial year. I don't know, but they've changed in this financial year, or from when I last talked about them anyway. So I'll put a circumstance on the screen. Maybe, you drive 10,000 kilometers for business use within the financial year. And I think the rate is around 90 cents now. I don't know off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me, but anyway, that would enable you to be able to claim $9,000 towards your business. So again, with the same circumstance, if you claimed business mileage and your income was $50,000 per year, you'd be eligible to claim, $9,000 or whatever, right? I think I've explained that pretty well. Again, it's very, very oversimplified and a simplistic example, but again, I just kind of want to share the two circumstances and how they work and how you go about navigating them. Now, in terms of actually filing your tax return and letting the IRD know how much income you've made, there's a couple of different things you can do to go about it. You can actually file it and do it all personally. So for example, I might say, hey, IRD, I made $50,000 doing Uber Eats last year. I paid $10,000 worth of expenses and 75% of those expenses were for business use. And if they want to say, okay, prove it, I can say, hey, I use the Driver's Note service. I've got every single trip that I've done tracked and indicated which ones were for business. And I've got all my receipts here from all of my various different expenses that are related to my car. And then you pay, the tax that you're due on the net profit that you made. Or alternatively, you can get a software or somebody to help you do the whole process. That's the route that I've personally gone down because I don't think I'm really competent or confident enough to do it myself just yet. And I don't know if I ever really will, to be honest. I think I'll always kind of outsource that service because there's a saying out there that a good accountant just pays for itself, and I'm definitely a big believer of that. And the software that I'm using at the moment is called Henry. So I made videos about Henry and how the service works. I won't be doing a tutorial in this video because I have made one previously, and I'll leave where you can access that tutorial. I don't really want to repeat myself too much. I'm repeating myself actually quite a lot in this video about information I've already said. So I'll leave access to the tutorial somewhere on the screen if you are curious about how that software works. But again, just to be simplistic and oversimplify it, pretty much what I do is I just upload all of my receipts to the software. I can kind of call them at any time if I have any problems or questions. They have a pretty big accounting team It's a pretty solid service, to be fair. Now, there may be one or two things that I missed off the top of my head. If I have missed them, please leave them in the comments below. I'm going to be trying to, help as many people as I possibly can with all this information, of course. Now, hopefully all of that information is going to get you kick-started and maximize the earnings that you make as an Uber driver. I think that is more than enough to get you on your way and earning a pretty solid amount doing Uber Eats. And I'll also put some other videos of mine on the screen that I consider pretty valuable that would really help you if you're wanting to become an Uber driver as well.